One of my first jobs was at a service station in an affluent white neighborhood here in Houston. I was about 16. 3 people worked at the station, an old black guy, a young white guy, and myself. One day a customer's radiator was damaged. The boss said we'd all have to pay for it and he'd take it out of next week's check. The white guy told me later he didn't plan to pay for the man's radiator out of his pocket. When payday came, he showed me his check, and sure enough, he hadn't paid for the man's radiator, but we had. I was pretty upset about it. I told the black guy that the white guy hadn't paid 1 cent for the man's radiator. He looked at me and said, "Well, you didn't think he would, did you?"
Memories of Jim Crowism are still very fresh in the minds of many of Houston's black citizens. Jim Crow was very much a part of Houston in the 50s, but the city would be challenged to meet the needs of all its citizens. Negroes were determined to be a part of the total society, and in the next 20 years, they repeatedly challenged the segregated system. In 1950, 5 Negroes filed suit to use a municipal golf course. In 1953, the NAACP protested the segregated cafeteria of the new county courthouse. In 1956, 2 years after the Supreme Court declared segregated schools unconstitutional, a few Negroes tried and failed to register at white Houston schools. The NAACP filed suit on behalf of 2 youngsters. In 1952, a black family bought a $26,000 home on Wichita Street in the fashionable white residential area of Riverside Terrace. The family was approached repeatedly by an association of its white neighbors who wanted to buy them out. Their efforts failed, and in April of the following year, those first months of tension and anger were thought to have subsided. Then, on April 16th, 4 sticks of dynamite shattered the early morning silence before daybreak. The family sleeping in the rear of the house was unharmed, and within 20 hours, police had charged 2 men with the bombing. The house on Wichita and much of Riverside Terrace today has been raised to make room for the South Freeway. But Jack Caesar, a successful cattle buyer, remembers that at the time he could well afford a newer and better home.
We had money at that time, and the wife wanted to buy, and it wasn't a matter of moving the neighborhood. You couldn't find nice homes nowhere but in that neighborhood, and so we just bought into it without knowing what the consequence would be. So at that time, I think I bought a house cost $26,500, and I paid $12,000 something down on it. And we just moved in there without the knowledge of knowing what was going to happen. And after we got in there, everything blew up. I was staying there for a long time, and they thought white owned it, and I was living there, caretaker of, you know. I guess I was in there about 3 months or longer, and they thought, because everybody in the neighborhood, some of the rich homes was being taken care of by Negro chauffeurs and maids and things, and the people was gone for months, and so they thought that's what we were doing. After they found out we bought the home, that's when they ganged up on us and finally led to the bombing.
Caesars was the first black family to enter Riverside, but by no means was it the last. Many of the whites panicked and fled, and today, 14 years later, Riverside Terrace is 98% black. A current resident of Riverside Terrace is Mrs. Charles E. White, the first Negro elected to the Houston School Board. In 1958, Mrs. White, elected by a combination of blacks and whites, was the only liberal on a conservative school board.
There was never a time during the 9 years that I sat on the board that the board itself determined that it would meet with blacks to get the feel or to work out a solution, fairly satisfactory to both black and white. The issue was just avoided. All decisions in relation to court fights or in relation to the policies that we followed in desegregation matters were determined by the attorney, who was Joe Reynolds. If we lost a decision or if we were ordered to do something, the board never discussed openly and as a full board whether or not we would appeal the decision or whether we would continue to spend tax funds fighting desegregation. We just followed whatever was the dictate of the attorney. And so practically nothing was done.
Under an accelerated program, desegregation was completed between 1966 and 1967, but the apparent trauma of the process caused many problems that to date are still unresolved. The tempo of change increased during the 60s, whereas the issue of school desegregation was and is continuing to undergo evolution. Restrictions in other areas were challenged and resolved, although not without a fight. One example involved segregated public facilities. On March 4, 1960, 17 brave and determined young students from Texas Southern University started the student protest movement, later to be known as the Progressive Youth Association. The students sat in at lunch counters and took to the streets with their protests. The sit-inners challenged segregated eating facilities at many of the downtown department store chains and at the City Hall cafeteria. By 1964, most discrimination in public facilities and in city-owned buildings had ended. In 1966, 2 blacks were elected to the Texas legislature. State Senator Barbara Jordan and Representative Curtis Graves were forerunners of what seemed to be a small but growing vanguard of black politicians. The times were changing, but there was still much fear and frustration and distrust in Houston. Many whites wondered, what do the blacks want now? A few whites listened as a few blacks attempted to articulate the frustrations of the community, but somehow, while all the rhetoric was going on, both sides were caught unawares by the TSU disturbance. The school that produced those 17 brave and determined young students just a few years before became a school embroiled in a nightmare.